back and delighted and always honored when we have time to sit down with Leighton Grey. He's the host of Grey Matter podcast, now shown on the Canada's largest Christian network up there, the Miracle Channel. His 50-book essay entitled Leftist Lies, Laws, and Liberties will be released a little bit later on. We'll talk to him about that. Leighton is a CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project and was named one of the top 50 lawyers by Canada's in 2023 by the Canadian Law Society. He's a proud Canadian. He's a conservative and tireless advocate for the restoration of civil liberties guaranteed to all of us by God and the rule of law, and in that order. He does have a website, returntoreason.com. There's a picture of that landing page, returntoreason.com. Leighton, good to see you again. How are you, friend?
I'm doing very well. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be back on your program.
Yeah, thank you for your time. We value that greatly. Well, listen, last time we talked, you were in the process of getting a new prime minister. Now you got one.
We sure do.
How's it going, Coach?
You know, the jury is out for many Canadians, with the exception of my home province of Alberta. You know, we never voted for this man. He's not really considered the leader of our country, but you know, very, very strange things are happening. It's not clear at this point whether Mark Carney is going to veer away from the policies of Justin Trudeau, whether he's going to continue them and double down, or whether actually he's a World Economic Forum acolyte who's just intent on destroying our country. He said recently publicly at a meeting in front of a Muslim conference in Toronto. Incidentally, that conference funds Palestinian terrorism. He said that Muslim values are Canadian values, which was rather shocking to those of us who are Christians in this country, who are still the majority here. And then at the same time, you know, he's at the G7 welcoming Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I don't know if you saw this video, but Mr. Trump, he has a habit of saying things that are inconvenient but happen to be true. Like if Justin Trudeau was responsible for kicking Vladimir Putin out of the G8, and that was largely responsible for the war that's going on over there. And Mr. Carney's reaction was to invite Mr. Zelensky to the G7. Only heaven knows why. After Donald Trump had left the G7 conference in Kananaskis. Incidentally, in Alberta, Albertans are very proud and honored to have President Trump in our province. We were honored to have him here, and he said that he enjoyed being here, and we hope that he comes back very soon.
All right, so everybody knows he left early because of what's going on in the Middle East. Was that viewed as okay, or certainly not as a snub, I hope?
Well, no, I don't think so. But, you know, it's interesting. It's very clear that Donald Trump is the head of the G7. In fact, Mark Carney said as much in that press conference I mentioned. But it's not clear what the G7 has to offer America right now. Donald Trump seems to have bigger things to do. And, you know, he quite rightly points out that, you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to meet there with the likes of Russia and even China not being involved. He's certainly one who thinks that more conversation is better, and that excluding people with whom you might disagree from a conversation is not the way to get business done. But I happen to think that what Donald Trump and Mr. Netanyahu are doing is of great benefit to the entire world, and that, of course, his attention to that issue is of much more importance than meeting with world leaders for photo opportunities in Kananaskis, as beautiful as the mountains are.
Well, you made a good point there. We're asking ourselves in America, what's the point of G7, G8, G20? I mean, why do this stuff when they put the resolution on the table that we just want to monitor the nuclear program in Iran? That pretty much ends the deal right there.
Yeah.
You know. So let me ask you just a little bit off schedule here. Is there any truth to a rumor that Alberta is thinking about becoming independent?
It's more than a rumor. It's a movement, and it's stronger than it has ever been in my lifetime. And the reason why, just to boil it down, is that Alberta culturally has more in common with the United States than it does with the rest of Canada. And this is not by accident. We have very deep ties to the US, particularly the northwestern part of the US. But even now, most of our trade ties in terms of oil and gas are with the US. Canada is the federal government, Mr. Carney's government, is actually banning the construction of pipelines that would transport oil and gas from Alberta to the rest of the country, if you can believe it. They're even passing laws that will restrict Alberta's ability to get oil and gas to Tidewater in Vancouver, which is the closest place where we can send oil and gas. So most of the oil and gas that's produced in Alberta actually goes down to Houston for refinement and then for distribution to the rest of the world. So actually, on a pure economic basis, it makes a lot of sense for Alberta not to be part of Canada. And then culturally, it's important for people to understand who don't know our history. A century ago, for over 40 years, the leaders of our province, our premiers who operate as governors here in Canada, were actually Bible Belt, Bible thumping radio preachers, literally. And so we have a deep Christian culture in Alberta that unfortunately is not shared by the central part of Canada. Particularly places like Ontario and Quebec. Quebec, incidentally, has become a completely secularized society. In fact, they recently passed a law making it illegal to have any form of public religious expression in that province, if you can believe it.
Could Alberta secede from the Union, so to speak?
Yes, the structures are there. It's a question of whether or not pragmatically, it can happen. Through the Alberta Prosperity Project, I've had a deep involvement in this. I actually helped to write a new Bill of Rights for Alberta, which borrowed extensively from Thomas Jefferson's version. But this is a serious question. Many Albertans are actually proud Canadians. We're actually, I think, the most patriotic people in the country. But what Albertans want to do is we want to conserve and preserve the Canada that we knew and loved. And in Alberta, even though we're sort of swimming against the tide, we're holding back, sort of the sea of secularism and globalism that's flooding in from the rest of Canada, particularly Ottawa. But what we want to preserve all that, and unfortunately, we don't see any other way that can be done right now, except for separating from the rest of Canada. Ottawa has been waging an economic war against Alberta for decades, and really, what's deeper than that is the cultural war. They want to wipe away sort of the Judeo-Christian foundations of our society. Ottawa clearly has already done that. They've been set on doing that for a very long time. But Alberta is resisting that, and that's why we see, many of us, including myself, see separation from the rest of Canada as the only way that Alberta can survive as a free and democratic society.
So if you became independent, obviously you'd have to figure out a way to protect yourself. Would you guys consider State 51?
That has already been discussed, and my understanding from the people who have actually met with people with the Secretary of State in the U.S. is that these discussions have been had. The United States is not interested in annexing Alberta, for example. But however, we have very clear indications from the United States that they would support and respect an independent Alberta, and that from there would be economic relationships, cultural relationships, political relationships that could develop into a deeper union, as it were. And who knows what would derive from there. So the short answer is America wants to see Alberta become independent first, to be self-determining, and not being seen as annexing Canada in the way that's being talked about, for example, with Greenland.
Okay, so if your leader, your prime minister, continues to pull you into the global economic forum and everything in that direction, that just fuels the interest for you to become independent. And you don't know quite where he is yet, but it doesn't appear that he's going to go any other direction but what really he truly is.
Well, I think he has deep ties to the European Union. He carries British and Irish passports. He's told us that he's going to spend billions of dollars. He just made an announcement he's going to give $2 billion more to Ukraine, which is money that Canada doesn't have to spend there. He has said he's going to upgrade NATO to the 2% of GDP that he's supposed to be doing, and yet he's saying that he's going to develop deeper ties with Europe in terms of military security rather than with the United States. And that isn't something that he ran on in the most recent election. That's not a mandate that he has for the Canadian people. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether Mark Carney's very clear globalist intentions are going to be something that the Canadian electorate is going to tolerate. He has a very, very thin minority in Parliament, very tenuous, and it could be shattered at any time. And so I would not be surprised if Canadians are going back to the polls within the next year to 18 months.
Weren't you scheduled to have an election like this fall?
We had an election in April.
I know that.
And
okay.
yeah, he was elected in a very, very thin majority. So very thin minority, I should say. And so that election has occurred. However, he does not have anything close to a parliamentary majority. And so a non-confidence vote in our parliament could trigger another election. And I think that is exceedingly likely if Mark Carney continues on his current course, where he's supporting Ukraine, the Ukraine war, which most Canadians oppose, much like in the United States, and where he supports Palestine rather than Israel in this ongoing conflict. And I think it's very clear that's his position. That's the globalist position. And of course, that is very offensive to many people in our country, especially who are Jewish and who are Christians and support preservation of Israel as a state and see the need for the work that is being done by President Trump and Mr. Netanyahu to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear capable power.
They were both on the world stage at G7 a couple of days ago. They seem to be civil. Are they?
I think that you see a very distinct clash in personalities. If you just look at the body language, Donald Trump is always, chin up, chest out, head back. Mark Carney, arms folded behind his back, slouching, stuttering. He very much is in awe of President Trump, which is to be understandable. Let's face it. President Trump is a very impressive person. His reputation precedes him, and when he arrives, he doesn't disappoint that reputation. And I think Mark Carney, very clearly is intimidated by the president, but once the president is out of the room, he tends to work against him, and that is not in Canada's interest. That certainly does not support what Albertans, people in my home province, want, and I think it places us in jeopardy because we're very reliant upon the United States, not only economically but also militarily. We have very, very close cultural ties that Canadians want to preserve and sustain and grow for the future.
All right, let me take a quick break. Check out Leighton's website, and that is returntoreason.com. By the way, when's your book coming out?
Well, we just got the cover art. I'll tell you, it's a rendition of the execution of St. Thomas More, which you'll know has relevance because Thomas More is the patron saint of lawyers. And of course, he gave his life in observance of his faith against an oppressive king, which obviously has implications for what's going on in Canada.
Okay.
Not that I want to lose my head, by the way.
So when do you think it'll be out, roughly?
We're trying to get it out by the end of July.
Okay.
And then I'll have hopefully a promotional tour, and I'd love to come back and talk to you about it once it's released.
Yeah, we certainly will. All right, returntoreason.com is his website. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and certainly delighted and honored to have back with us today Leighton Grey, the host of the Grey Matter podcast, which is there on Canadians' largest Christian network, the Miracle Channel. He's got a book coming out. We'll stay close to him, hopefully by the end of July, Leftist Lies, Laws, and Liberties, and we'll talk to him about that as we get a little closer to the release date, talking about a bunch of things up there. But Leighton, we had an interesting report come out yesterday about the United States border at the south. And a year ago, 64,000 people came across that border in May. This May, zero. Zero. It's stunning. I mean, zero. And I understand you have passed a Stronger Borders Act up there. Give us an update of your border issues.
Firstly, isn't it astonishing that Donald Trump could do in one day what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris said could not be done? Yeah. But it just goes to show if you make the right decisions, how they can be put into action. Mm-hmm. The bill you're talking about is of great concern to Canadians. It's called Bill C-2, and it's a bit of a Trojan horse. I've taken a close look at this bill, and it's rather horrifying for Canadians. Although it pretends to be aimed at securing Canada's border, which is of great concern to people like Kash Patel, because unfortunately, bad actors and things like fentanyl are still entering the United States through Canada, through the northern border. This new bill does very little to secure the border, but it does have some nefarious parts to it. For example, it's going to usher in digital currency in Canada. It actually makes it a criminal offense, if you can believe it, for anyone in Canada to complete a cash transaction of $10,000 or more. That's becoming criminal. Apparently, this is somehow related to border security. It has implications for other forms of legislation that exist in Canada. For example, our passport holders. In order to renew your passport, Canadians will have to provide all sorts of detailed personal information about their actual residency, and they may be denied renewal of their passports. And this is all connected back to Bill C-2. So unfortunately, like everything else that this Liberal government does, it says that it's doing something with the left hand, and then it does something else with the right. Very similar to Bill C-63, which is the hate speech law. It's supposed to be aimed at protecting Canadians from disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech. But the actual boots on the ground net effect of it is to bring into Canada, in existence in Canada, much like we're seeing in Great Britain, where people are being arrested and imprisoned for years based upon Facebook posts. Which the government doesn't like because it challenges some of their narratives. So unfortunately, this legislation that the Liberals have conceived is going to do very little to prevent the flow of bad people and drugs into the United States. And I don't think that's going to change until Mark Carney and his government abandon their allegiance to the concept of globalism, one of the tenets of which, as you know, is open borders.
Right. Wow, you guys got a lot going on up there. If you just take this border bill alone, not to mention the other squeezing of your culture, you add AI to that.
Yeah,
everybody's in trouble.
Yes, this is what we're experiencing in Canada. That's maybe a little bit different than what Americans are experiencing. I would say to compare and contrast what's happening between the U.S. and Canada, I would put it this way. If you go back 5 years to what happened during COVID, both people in the U.S. and Canada experienced a very severe shock to our civil liberties and our individual freedoms during COVID through the lockdowns and things like vaccine mandates. However, what has happened in the United States is really COVID is largely over and a page has been turned. And really the turning point obviously was the election last November. And Donald Trump and his administration has taken the U.S. in an entirely different direction, one that's more aimed at nationalism than globalism. For Canada, what has happened since the COVID-19 pandemic is the Trudeau government and now the Carney government have actually begun a campaign that has ratcheted down. So we've seen a progressive reduction and infringement of our freedoms that's being enforced through legislation, through our courts. Our media is still government controlled, expressing false narratives. We're seeing all of that continue in Canada in a progression that has not stopped. And so that's really the main distinction that I think your audience needs to understand about what's going on in Canada versus the United States.
Okay, so that obviously brings up the one we briefly talked about, and that's what ultimately is going to happen with religious freedom up there. Now, myself being in Christian broadcasting, we've had our issues in the United States, and I'm personally connected with an organization that has quite a few Christian radio stations up there. And the laws and the regulations that they're facing is amazing. How threatened is Christian broadcasting up there?
Well, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart as well. And I actually represent in my practice some Christian broadcasters who are having trouble actually getting their licenses renewed because the government of Canada has imposed all sorts of woke DEI requirements of multiculturalism and so on and so forth, which, as you know, are offensive to fundamental principles of Christian theology that are deeply rooted and are biblical. And so, of course, no Christian practicing properly is racist, misogynist, or discriminatory in any way. That's not how our Lord viewed the human race. In fact, there's not a single hint of racism or anything of the like in the Gospels. But of course, this new woke religion, this secular religion, is all based upon identity politics, and it's a direct affront to Christianity. And when you see our Prime Minister going on television before millions of people saying that Muslim values are Canadian values, that gives you an idea of how deep this attack is upon Christianity in our country.
I'm really concerned. You ever heard of the UCB radio network up there?
Yes, I have. Yes. Yeah. They're doing great work.
Our organization started that.
Yeah.
So, well, we're concerned because we see this around the world, and, we're really concerned. And if you have provinces out there and you have Alberta and other places that are really traditional in their beliefs, and certainly as being Canadians, you would think that there's a hope here. In spite of this nonsense, there's going to be a rising pushback.
I think where we're seeing this, I think this is very true in the United States, but it's also true in Canada. We're seeing it in our youth. Oh. As you know, whatever is done for evil, the Lord turns to good.
Right.
And what's happened with the wokeism that's been pushed in our schools and in our universities, many of our young people are rejecting this, and they're returning to faith. They're returning to traditional forms of faith, such as the Latin Mass. And we're seeing outdoor Christian revivals, which really were not part of previous generations. So I think there's great hope for the future. I think, we're over 2,000 years and the Lord's undefeated. Yep. The battle is won, as we know, as Christians. But, we have to act out history. Yeah. We know how history ends, but those of us here and living, we have to act it out. Yep. We have to do our best to walk in the Lord's footsteps.
Leighton, you're an inspiration. Thank you, my friend. Let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out his website, returntoreason.com. There's a picture of the landing page. I look forward to talking to you a little bit closer to the release of the book. Should be fascinating. And I think we'd love to have you as an independent neighbor to the United States.
That would be beneficial for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
But, thank you so much for having me back on your program. It's always my pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you. It'll be a start. We can exchange a few things when that happens. Thanks, Leighton. God bless you, friend.
Thank you. You too.